Hi guys, in this video we're going to be looking at a test route from Chilwell. Now this is actually a driving test. The pupil wasn't successful on this attempt, unfortunately. There's a handful of faults to go through in this video, so let's have a look at it. Coming through the test centre car park, of course, take your time and keep to the left. The pupil does a really nice job of that. The buildings create huge blind spots at those corners, so we don't want to come rushing around those corners in the test centre car park. Just really slow and steady, and as you reach the end of the road as well, joining Eldon Road, you see the pupil here takes it really slow and steady so she can check out the road and the footpath as she leaves the test centre. Coming up to the traffic lights at the end of this road, the pupil's going to be turning left onto the main road and they're going to be heading straight towards Long Eaton. Whenever you're queuing at traffic lights, I'd like to see a little bit more room than what this pupil's left. Now, the examiner hasn't deemed it as worthy of a fault. However, you should be able to see the bottom of the tyres of the car in front when you stop. So any closer than that becomes a little bit questionable and could get you a fault. So just be very mindful of that one. Turning out onto the main road, the pupil goes to take up the left-hand lane but spots the van up ahead at the bus stop. So I'm going to say good mirror use here, just checking nobody's coming around in lane 2 already. Someone coming out from the junction behind could fly straight into lane 2 and go for the overtake. So we want to be very careful of moves like that. Use those mirrors before you change lanes, even if it's a very quick change like that. And then back to lane 1 as soon as you pass the van. Again, mirror use before you change lanes. If you don't check your mirrors, you're going to get marked, especially if there's somebody nearby and the examiner has to intervene. So lots and lots of mirror use, and use those signals if there's anyone nearby as well, just to confirm what you're up to. Just as we cross these lights, the lanes merge. I'd like to see lots of right mirror use here to make sure that if there's anyone overtaking, you're ready to deal with them, whether that means keeping your pace and making them drop in behind, or easing off and just letting them pass. Just keep on those mirrors, because that is a risky spot as lanes merge, because not everybody is very good at planning for those, let's say. Sometimes people will chance it, so lots of mirror use. Cannot stress the mirror use enough. Notice the direction sign on the left there. Now we're going straight ahead at this set of lights, and that requires you to use the left-hand lane. So you'll see the markings as you come up. You'll also notice that the lights are individual for straight and right. So the right-hand turn is on red. Our lights have just went red, so the pupil brings the car to a nice stop behind the line. Now she's a little bit shy of the line on this one, so it's not problematic, but a little bit closer wouldn't do any harm. Soon as that filter light changes, away we go. Notice the car on the right there carrying on through a red light. So be very careful of those filter lights. If you're looking at the wrong light, then it can cause you issues. If you do what that car on the right did, that would be a serious fault on your test. The examiner would end up intervening, stopping you from continuing. So you don't want to be caught out by those filter lights or those separated lights at junctions like that. So just be mindful that the lights you're looking at actually apply to you before you go. As we go along this road, you notice the solid line on the left for the cycle lane. This is a mandatory cycle lane, so you're not allowed to drive in it at all. There are exceptions, of course, like if you pull over to let an emergency vehicle past, or you physically cannot get past an oncoming vehicle, then you can move in to that cycle lane, but it's an absolute no in normal circumstances. Do not cross solid lines unless it's absolutely necessary. Up ahead, notice the car pulling out. Not the best choice on their part, stick the nose out like that. The pupil responds okay, keeping back from the junction to allow them room to turn. If anything like that's happening, the examiners just want to see good mirror use and good planning as you come up to those problems. And like this pupil did, just hanging back, let the problem move out of your way, and then move on. Notice how she keeps back from the junction too, because of the queue ahead, That's really good planning and awareness there. The examiners like to see that. If she moved up and blocked that junction on the left, she could cause problems for cars trying to go in from the oncoming side of the road, and that, of course, could result in a serious fault on your test. So we want to make sure those side roads are clear and we don't obstruct them if we can avoid it. Some of you might have noticed the ghost car on the right there. I've just skipped the camera ahead because the pupil sat at this queue for about a minute 20 on the video, and there's no point you staring at the back of this little Toyota for a minute 20 and me not saying anything. That would be absolutely mind-numbing. However, do notice that the pupil's leaving a little bit more room behind these cars, allowing that view of the road in between as well. If you can see the road in between, then you can see any markings, and that can help you just keep more aware of the road markings and reduce the risk if you ended up, let's say, in a keep clear box or in the wrong lane if you're on a road where the lanes open out. So yeah, just leave a bit of room and that will help you keep more aware of your environment and spot those road markings if there's any to be spotted. In slow moving traffic like this, you can see the pupils keeping a really good following space. This is allowing her to see around the blue car as well. I would be very keen to see lots of mirror use here because of the bike lane on the left. There's always the potential of one sneaking up, and as you move up, if you're turning left especially, or if you need to move in, you want to know if there's a cyclist coming up the left side of you. As you can see from the direction sign there, we've got a roundabout coming up. So already you should be thinking about what direction you're taking and really zoning in on your direction. This roundabout's not too difficult because you've just got left, straight and right. But of course, the more complicated ones, you want to zone in on your exit. On this roundabout, the pupil's going to be going straight ahead towards Derby, and that's the second exit. There are 2 lanes to do that. So you want to make sure that we're keeping space on the car in front so you can see the markings, ensuring you can then get in the correct lane for that junction. As well as that, you've got your normal roundabout routines, such as focusing on the exit, looking at the gaps you can cross in, and looking for traffic that might prevent you from going. So keep your eyes moving on approach, watching the mirrors too, because anything overtaking you, like the motorbike that's just passed, if you miss things like that and you have to change position, then that's going to create a lot of risk. So very good awareness is important on approach to roundabouts, particularly where there's more than one lane. Notice how the pupil's taking lane 2 because lane 1 is queuing up quite noticeably, and this is absolutely fine. Now, leaving the roundabout, the ideal would be to stick right in this situation. You're on the right on the way in, so you should be on the right on the way out. And if you're going to change lane, you want to make sure there's lots and lots of mirror use and that the signals are done in good time and nice and clear for other traffic to see before you change position. The car on the left there prevents anyone being on the left, so that gives the pupil a clear pass to move to the left-hand lane. As long as the mirrors are covered, that's not an issue. If you don't check those mirrors, that car moves up and someone starts coming alongside you, you're going to have a problem. This roundabout catches a few people out because some seem to think the lights apply to the roundabout. They don't. It is a giveaway junction. You can see the pupil taking the left lane nice and wide on the way around there. This is absolutely beautiful line to take. The car in front, of course, using the right lane and then switching left as they leave. There's no issue with that as long as there's good mirror use. The signalling was done in good time and there was nothing alongside them. So the mirror use would be the key there to make sure it's safe. And again, just watching out for these crossings as you leave junctions. It's so easy to overlook them when you're coming off of a roundabout because you'd be so focused on building your speed and checking your mirrors, seeing who's with you. It can be easy to overlook those crossings. So look up and ahead before you leave the roundabout too to spot things like that. Again, as you come up to crossings, just scan around for people who might be looking to use it. You can see the mobility scooter on the right there. So that will be your clue. Those lights are going to change before you get there. And we should be easing off, ready to stop. The pupil does a really nice job of that. The mirrors should be covered as well, so you know what's going on behind. If there's a bike potentially going to come around you as you stop, then we want to know about that. So when we move off, we're nice and safe then. If you don't know what's around you, you can't prepare for it, so you can't keep safe. And that's what the examiners will be looking for to is good mirror use, good awareness of what's all around you. On a lot of these right turns, you'll notice you can use that center area to make the turn. So that's what you should be doing on these junctions, all four wheels in that center area. Now being there will allow cars to pass you safely while you're waiting to turn right. Notice the car coming the other way. That's a really good example of how to use those filter boxes. You want to make sure all four wheels are in and you're completely clear of the straight on lane of the cars behind you so they can get around safely. Now, keeping that in mind about these filter lanes and these filter boxes for right turns, that might help you spot what's going on with the pupil up ahead that causes her to get a first driver fault. Now, when you're dealing with these turns, of course, you've got to look for the oncoming cars and be ready to give way. So, like I said earlier, we want to get all four wheels in that filter box so we're out the way of the lane that carries on ahead. Unfortunately, what the pupil does is she turns in very late, not using that protected filter box, and then has to pause for the oncoming cars. Now, the reason this is recorded as a driver fault and not a serious fault is because there was nothing close behind that was disrupted by the pupil doing this. The examiner did say there was a lorry a short way behind, but because it was quite far back, there was no problem caused. And that gets her away with the driver fault. But just be very mindful of those filter boxes. If you do see them on your right turns, make sure you get all four wheels lined up in there. And then you can wait in a safe spot where you can let cars behind pass you as well. The examiner is going to get the pupil to pull up on the left here behind the blue car, and this is known as an angle start, where you're asked to pull up behind a parked vehicle around about a car length away and then drive on again. All the examiners want to see is that you can pull up nice and cozy to the curb, nice and straight, and that when you go, not only are you checking your blind spots, making sure you're safe, but you're also looking for the oncoming traffic as you swing around that parked car, and that you can do it safely and under good control. If you're getting too close to that car or you're steering way out onto the wrong side, unnecessarily wide, then that's going to pick up faults on your test. So the aim for these is take your time, check your mirrors, check your blind spot, look for cars ahead of you, and of course, aim straight to where you want to be. Don't go too wide around that car and don't stare at the car because you'll end up too close to it as well. You can see the pupil keeping a nice low pace down this road as well. We've got lots of parked cars on either side as we go down. And of course, we've got to keep an eye out for oncoming cars too. If we need to move out into the oncoming lane, we've got to be prepared to give way. The pupil's going to pull up on the left again in a moment. You'll do this about 3 or 4 times on your driving test. And again, it's just so the examiner can see that you can park the car in a reasonable place and that you can move off safely as well without causing any problems for other traffic. So lots and lots of mirror use, blind spot checks, and don't forget your signal if there's anyone nearby. If there are cars coming up behind you, don't feel pressured to rush out in front of them as well. This bit, you can see the examiner's reflection there. She's just setting up the Sat Nav. So this is the start of the independent driving where the pupil's going to be following Sat Nav rather than the examiner directing them. If you do this on your test, just keep an eye on the Sat Nav. Don't rely on it entirely and don't worry if you miss a turn. It's not the end of the world. It's better that you go the wrong way safely than trying to get the right direction dangerously. I'd also say just to be mindful of speed limits on the Sat Nav as well. A lot of Sat Nav units will display the speed. They're not always correct. So look out for road signs that reaffirm that speed limit rather than relying on the Sat Nav if you're unsure. Typically in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, you won't see any repeater signs. In 20s or 40-mile-an-hour zones, you will see reminders regularly. So keep your eyes out for them. Up ahead here, the road bends round to the right, and where the markings are clear enough for you to see, the examiners generally won't say anything and they'll expect you to follow those markings. So you can see the giveaway lines here showing that that road is a left turn. So the pupil follows around to the right absolutely perfectly. As you make the turn, you can see the parked cars on the right there. So you've got to make sure your eyes are leading the way and you can see if there's any problems in that road before you make the turn. Now, whilst the camera can't do that, you can by looking out of your driver's side window before you make the turn, or your passenger side window before you make a left turn. Mini roundabout there as well. Just be mindful of traffic from the right hand side who would have priority over you, and if it's safe like the people did here, just keep your wheels turning, keep it moving. Again, lots of parked cars and not a very good view ahead, so you can see the pupils carrying a lowered speed as she goes down this road, and that is absolutely spot on. There's no rush to make your way down these roads. It's better to be slow and safe than it is to be fast. Another pull up on the left. You see she's quite close to the drive on the left there, but just enough out the way to not be a problem. Remembering that blind spot just before pulling out, and because you're moving out round a parked car, my advice would be double check that blind spot just to be sure. If you're moving into a narrow road like this where there's cars as well on either side, just be mindful of oncoming vehicles, that you're keeping an eye out for any of those and not causing a problem when you move out. If you're not sure and you think there might be something coming, you can always pause, use that time to take a few breaths and reset your mind so you can focus on the next bit of driving. So what you don't want to do is carry any mistakes with you as you make your way along. That's what causes distractions, and that of course can lead then to bigger mistakes. Notice the 40 sign on the left there. This is a really easy one to miss because you come up to the junction, you look into the right for traffic, and as you turn, that sign on the left is hidden by the roof of the car. So very, very careful when you come up to roads like this. Look around before you pull out to see if there's any speed changes. Just a little further up, there's a mini roundabout, which should be signposted, but there's no signpost for it. And this causes a little confusion with some of my pupils. So you can see the sign there right for the M1. That's where the pupil will be going, not onto the M1, obviously. And you can see the markings here for the roundabout. There's usually a blue sign at mini roundabouts. So just be careful of this one because the signs are missing. As you can see, the pupil's doing a great job of waiting for the traffic from the right to clear. As soon as the right-hand side is clear, you can move in, and the cars in front of you should stop for you because they'll be on your left as you make the turn. Nice, easy way of remembering this, particularly at mini roundabouts because everything's close together, is anyone on the right gets right over you, anyone on the left gets left behind you. So keep that in mind as you go around roundabouts, and that will keep you flowing nice and smoothly. Notice the speed change ahead. We're going into a national speed limit road. Now, whilst this is a 60-mile-an-hour road, I would not do 60 up here. I'd aim for about 40 to 45 at the most because there's a few side roads. You've got the bends, you've got a highways depot on the left up ahead. So you just want to keep your eyes moving for vehicles moving in and out of those side roads. Like the blue car on the right is sat a little bit short of the give way line, but he is there waiting to pull out, and the white car on the right there as well. Notice the sign there, Q is likely up ahead, and then the diagram of the roundabout as well. You'll see Nottingham is on the last exit on the bottom right of the sign there, and that's where the pupil is going. You would typically do Nottingham from this direction. So you can see the pupil lining up on the right-hand side, bringing that speed down, ready for the roundabout. From this side, it is a give way as well. There's no traffic lights to help you out, so you've got to make sure you're looking to the right for all the traffic coming from under the bridge and down the slip road off the A52. As we join the roundabout, you're on lane 3, so you go to lane 3. The pupil does a really nice job of that one. It's quite a fast roundabout too, so you want to get over there quite quickly. Looking up at that sign on the right there, you'll see Nottingham on the right-hand lane. So the pupil's in a brilliant position as she comes into the roundabout here. Coming around the curve, just be mindful of the lights, and under the bridge there's another set of lights. See how the line on the left drifts out to the middle position? Now the pupil has stayed in the right, it still says Nottingham. The middle would be ideal, but as long as you're in one of these two lanes, you can still make your way to Nottingham. Now the lane change does look a little bit sharp here, and ideally we shouldn't be moving across that sharply. However, there was an ambulance behind, and the pupil checked her mirrors and moved over just to create room for that ambulance to pass, but it left the roundabout before it passed her. So that lane change, as long as the mirrors and the signal are done and there's a reasonable cause to do it, then that is absolutely fine. But ideally, we should be taking more time to do those lane changes. So just so it's not on camera, a reminder, there is an emergency vehicle behind, and that's why she moves so sharply. Now here, the pupil is going to make her dangerous fault, unfortunately, where the examiner has to intervene. We're in the lane that can only go off to Nottingham. Because of the pressure caused by the emergency vehicle behind, the pupil tries to go round to the right. She loses her bearings, tries to go round to the right from that lane, which you're not allowed to do. And there was a car on the right, so the examiner had to bring the wheel back for her. Now, where the examiners intervene, of course, they have to record a dangerous fault. They have to record that they have taken action to prevent a problem there. And at that point, it is not recoverable. You have failed your test, unfortunately. And it's a real shame, because the examiner even commented that if not for that fault, it was generally a very good drive from this pupil. And that's really disheartening to have such a good drive ruined by one lapse in judgment. So be very, very careful not to let your mind wander and get distracted by anything, including emergency vehicles on big roundabouts. As hard as that is, you've got to keep your mind on what you're doing. Now, this pupil's keeping a good speed up here, just creeping over 50. Now, the speed limit is 70 miles an hour, but we have got cars ahead, so 50 seems pretty reasonable for the flow of traffic ahead as well. And this is absolutely fine. If you do get an opportunity to overtake, then by all means get on those mirrors, move out and overtake. However, sitting behind vehicles like this one at 50, not an issue on your test. Up ahead, the pupil will be going right towards Long Eaton, and the examiners will give you plenty of early notice about this one, because they want you to move into that right-hand lane. Now, the pupil commented on this one. The examiner said, "To help with your planning, we're going right at the roundabout." Now, that should be your cue to move into the right-hand lane. So when the examiner repeated it, the pupil then clicked that she needs to be in that right-hand lane. It does drop to 40, but notice how the pupil's speed is down at 30. Now, that's a little bit slow for this, and particularly where that speed drops, you'll be moving out while cars are still doing 60, 70 miles an hour behind you. So you want to be really, really careful of that. Now, the examiner's recorded this as driver fault, and I can't see what's behind, how close things are, so I can only assume that there was nothing close behind when this happened. If there was, then that would definitely go down as a serious or dangerous fault, depending on if the examiner needed to intervene or that other traffic needed to respond. As the pupil enters the roundabout, notice she takes the left-hand lane. You want to be covering that left mirror here, because sometimes you'll get cars entering from the middle lane, even though they shouldn't be doing that. The markings lead you straight in from where we are into both lanes. Now, the ideal is the left lane, which is what this pupil's done. If you find yourself on the right-hand lane, it's not the end of the world. Get past this set of lights and then look to change over. And of course, keep an eye on these lights. They are pretty much always red when you come in to the roundabout, so very, very mindful of that as you come across. Dropping into a 30 zone here, and then the pupil's going to be turning left into Toton Tram Stop to do her manoeuvre. There are some nasty speed ramps in Toton Tram Stops, so if you do go over them really, really slowly, about 2 or 3 miles an hour tops, because they are violent on the suspension, and you don't want to be hitting your head on the roof or throwing the examiner out the seat. The examiner brings the pupil into the car park on the left here before Toton Tram Stop, but there's still one of those ramps. So you can see the pupil brings the car right down to a crawl. You can see how violent those speed ramps are. They're not comfortable to go over at all, so very, very slow and steady, else you'll end up doing some harm to your car. Then, of course, we've got the typical take your time in a car park. Look out for other cars moving around. Look out for pedestrians moving around, going to the car. Just keep your speed nice and low. The pupil is going to be asked to do a reverse bay park. Now, I use the method where you pull up next to the space, swing out to the right, and then reverse in. I just find it more effective. The pupil does make a little correction in doing this, so that's going to be recorded as a driver fault, and you might notice it's going quite quickly. I've sped this up because she takes a couple of minutes doing it as well. When you do any of your maneuvers, if you're not happy with the result, make sure you correct it, because you don't want to leave it in a position that's going to cost you your test. If you're on or over the line, for example, you might want to just pull forward and correct that position. It'll only go down as a driver fault, but if you leave it, that could be a serious fault for control. The other thing is when you're reversing, of course, lots and lots of shoulder checks. don't let yourself stare at the mirrors or the cameras if you've got one. Make sure your head's moving from left shoulder to right shoulder frequently. Coming out of the car park over that lovely violent speed ramp, you can see how much the Seat in front there bounced up. Really, really slow and steady. And then the pupil's been asked to turn right here and then left at the traffic lights. You want to be over where that silver Citroen is. You go straight across to that first lane absolutely perfectly. Lots and lots of observations, of course, doing stuff like this because you've got a lot of ground to cover and there's lots of potential for cars to come in from the right and left there. So keep your head moving, but keep your mind focused on where you want to be. As I said earlier, I think this is a little bit close to be queuing up behind a car, particularly another learner. However, the examiner doesn't see it as enough to warrant a fault. So just be mindful of being too close to cars. As the pupil turns out, you'll notice the right-hand lane has arrows saying to merge in. So this is where you want to be covering that right mirror again, just making sure that if anyone is trying to get round you, trying to rush round you, that you're prepared for it and you can adjust. Because if you don't spot them, that could be a big problem for you. Just up ahead, you'll see the road drops quite steeply here. Be very, very mindful of your speed because it's easy for the car to pick up pace on the hill. You see the learner in front just leaning on the brakes. My pupil should be doing the same here to keep the speed under control. You can see the speed on the bottom left of the screen there, just keeping slightly shy of that 30-mile-an-hour mark. Anyone in front of you, of course, you want to keep a good following space on them. Don't get too close, particularly downhill where you're already on the brakes, because you're not going to get a warning from the brake lights because they're on constantly due to the hill. As the pupil's waiting here, you'll notice the car ahead flashing. If you do get an invite from a car like this, just be mindful of the body language of that car. If they change their mind or don't think you're quick enough, then they may start moving again. So look for how slow they're going and that they're definitely holding back for you before you commit. Equally, commit with confidence if you're sure that you can go. So you've got to make a really quick judgment there to avoid being hesitant or to avoid having an issue with that oncoming vehicle. Down these little side streets, you'll see the pupil keeping the speed quite low. She's going to get pulled up on the left again by the examiner. So just picking a good spot again, look for driveways, look for cars on the other side as well so you don't block the road. And when you move off again, lots of mirror use. Don't forget your blind spot and move off nice and safely. If there's anybody coming, just be patient and let them pass first, and that'll take away the pressure when you pull away. Notice the oncoming car there. The learner does make a move around there. I think this was a little bit risky. However, the oncoming car was quite slow. Now, whilst the examiner hasn't warranted that as a fault, it could very easily escalate into a driver fault or serious fault if the oncoming car isn't going slowly. I personally would record that as a driver fault on a mock test, but the examiner, of course, they're in the car. They can see more of what's going on so they can make a better judgment of that situation. At the end of the road, the learner is going to be taking a left turn, and that will bring us across the traffic lights then onto Swiney Way, and then we're nearly back at the test centre. Coming out of this junction, notice the parked car on the left there. Now that highlights the importance of looking to your left before you pull out. A lot of drivers unfortunately don't do this, and it can cause so many problems for situations like this. It's basically a case of checking that there are no oncoming vehicles when you go round that parked car, and that's going to keep you safe, of course. If you don't look up and you just pull out and then there's a parked car and an oncoming car, it's going to result in, at the best, an uncomfortable stop. I've mentioned this a few times on other videos where pupils come down here, but you'll notice as we come around the bend, there's a 20 mph sign on the left. It is on the inside of the fence, so it does not apply to the road. It applies to the vehicles inside that compound on the left. Notice the learner in front and how my pupil is getting a little bit closer to them occasionally. They're still keeping a fair distance. However, when this learner in front slows down and starts indicating to pull over, my learner is a little bit close behind them. And that results in my learner having to react quite quickly to the car in front pulling over, and the examiner records a fault for following distance, just getting a little bit too close to that vehicle. So just keeping back a little bit more from a learner in particular is going to give you plenty of time to react to them and just make things a little bit easier. I can't really pick up the fault very well on the camera here. However, the examiner deemed that as too close. So that's what we're going to go by. And of course, looking at a camera, and this in particular is a wide angle lens or a fisheye lens, and that does make things look a little bit further away than they actually are in reality. So we've got to take the examiner's word over the camera there that that was closer than it looked. Coming around the bend here, you'll see a warning for the roundabout on the left-hand side. At the roundabout, the pupil's going to turn right, followed by left at the traffic lights. The arrows on that roundabout we do not want to drive on. Keep off of that lower curb. The roundabout is a single-lane roundabout, so we're going to be mindful to stay on the outer edge of that roundabout as we go around it. Leaving the roundabout straight into the left-hand lane, ready to turn left at the traffic lights. Now there's a really odd filter light at these lights, so as the pupil comes up to them, you'll notice the left-hand set has an extra light on the bottom. That is a left filter, and on the far side there's a single light on its own. If you're first in the queue, you need to be looking across the road to that single light on its own, because that's going to tell you when to go to the left. If you're looking at the lights on the right hand side of you, they won't change when that filter comes on, so you'll be staring at a red light which doesn't apply to you when that green filter arrow is on. Be very, very careful of that, because I've seen a few pupils on lessons get caught by that. Pupils staying in lane 2 here because we're turning right back into the test centre, and you can see the filter lane there and the filter lights. We've got a red light while the other traffic's on green. If you pull up and the lights are in this sequence, then you're going to be here for about a minute or two. So I'm going to skip forward on that one. When the cycle changes, all the lights go green at the same time. Green filter arrow, meaning you can cross the oncoming cars nice and swiftly. And that's going to bring you back into the test centre. Just like on the way out, stick to the left-hand side and take your time around that test centre. Don't rush and don't sway all over the place, particularly at the junctions, the corners, where the buildings block your view. Pupil does a really nice job of that and then is asked to park forwards into any space at the end. You won't be marked for that last part, but if you can make it presentable, why not? Now that brings this driving test to an end, and you can see it wasn't too bad a drive, just that one fault on the roundabout that cost her this test, and that's really unfortunate to see. Hopefully we'll have a better result on this girl's next attempt. Thank you ever so much for watching this. I do hope it's been useful for you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, put a comment, and I'll try and keep these videos coming. Thank you again, and God bless you.